Hello again. I'm quite sure that most viewers will have heard of the famous court case which took place in London in 1772 when a black slave appealed to the courts for his freedom. Lord Mansfield ruled that slavery was not legal in England, and this soon led to the end of slavery across British overseas possessions as well. What is seldom mentioned, though, was that this judgment had no effect on the practice of slavery in Scotland, which was even at that time part of the United Kingdom, of course, and that slavery continued to exist there until 1799. We are talking here not of indentured labour or something of that sort, but actual chattel slavery, where men and women could be sold like animals. Their children became slaves in their turn, and anybody who ran away could be brought back to the place of work by force and compelled to remain there. In the 19th century, one old man still remembered how his owner had traded him for a pony. The human workers in the mines there were the equivalent of animals. They were treated like animals. So why don't we ever hear about slavery in Britain at that time? For one thing, it's a shameful episode that most people would sooner forget. The slaves of Scotland had no right in law and were specifically exempted from protection under habeas corpus. They had no rights at all. No more rights than a cat or dog. And for another thing, we have all heard so much about the transatlantic slave trade and the suffering of people in the Caribbean that it's rather overshadowed the experience of British people as slaves, which was taking place at exactly the same time that slavery existed on the plantations in Jamaica. These people that I'm talking of in Scotland were colliers, that is to say coal miners and salters. They were people who boiled salt water to extract salt from it by evaporation. Both jobs were very hard and dirty, and in Scotland men often gave up working at such places after a short time and sought easier work. At least that was the case during the Tudor period, but it made life very difficult for the owners of coal mines and salt pans. Coal was needed to keep fires going beneath huge vessels full of seawater, so that the water was boiled off and the salt left behind. To be efficient, the fires had to be kept burning day and night, and a continuous supply of coal was needed. So it was that in 1606 a law was passed in Scotland which prevented colliers and salters from leaving their employment without the permission of the person who owned the coal mine or salt pans. They were forced to remain working for that mine for the rest of their lives, unless the owner gave them freedom. And it was illegal for them to leave for any reason at all. They could be pursued and brought back by force if necessary, and it was against the law to shelter a runaway collier. Their children were born into slavery and had to work in the mines just like their mothers and fathers. When a mine was sold, the workers were listed as chattels, along with pit ponies and mechanical equipment. They belonged body and soul to the owner of the mine or salt pans. This situation is precisely the same as that of slaves on plantations in Jamaica, who were also bound to their place of work, could be freed if their owner wished, but it seldom happened, and if they ran away from the plantation, they could be brought back by force. It's slavery in Jamaica, slavery in Scotland, the same system. The law recognised this slavery both implicitly and explicitly. For instance, in 1701 a law was passed extending the protection enjoyed by English people under habeas corpus to Scotland. However, there was a clause in the Act which stated that no protection from arbitrary arrest and imprisonment should in no ways to be extended to colliers or salters. I give a few links about this subject in the description to this video, and the thumbnail shows some female slaves in Scotland working in a mine in the 18th century. We have been so hypnotised by the stories of black slaves in America and the Caribbean that we quite overlook the fact that white slaves in the late 18th century had less freedom in Britain than black ones. After all, slavery was effectively abolished in England after 1772, but the white slaves of Scotland were still in bondage and would not be free for another 30 years or so. The next time some fool starts talking about white privilege, it might be worth thinking about this.